Hello everyone. Welcome to the first episode of a new show called Chris's Classic Cinema. My name is Chris Wired and this is my good friend.
Hi, I'm Jacob Nemuth.
Today, for our first episode, we are going to be discussing films that take place around the 4th of July. As you can see, we're getting ready for the holiday, especially since it's around the corner. So we're going to be celebrating 4 films that take place during that time. First film is going to be going all the way back to 1912. Well, in this case, the film was made in 1962. That film is The Music Man, directed by Morton Costa and released by Warner Brothers Pictures. In the film, a con artist named Professor Harold Hill tries to set up a boys' band in a small Iowa town. Unfortunately, he gets a little too much in the role, especially when he falls in love with the local librarian.
Yeah, the film features stereo sound, some fantastic choreography, same cast and crew as also the associated musical. Musical predates the movie by about a year, and it was a smash hit on Broadway. And it uses a variation of Technicolor, which gets rid of film grain and makes the colors more vibrant and much higher resolution, a much sharper contrast. So it's an excellent showcase of music, of sound, and also of color.
Now, when it comes to this musical, it's honestly one of my favorites, because I gotta say, it just really helps bring the American spirit to life. It's just pure Americana.
Yeah, I mean, it does take a bit of a conservative approach when it comes to Americana. It's a good musical, but in my personal opinion, it really shouldn't be approached as a movie. It really should be approached more as a musical.
What's that?
Because the story elements are a bit lacking. The progression of the story itself is quite simple. It's a very simple story in itself, where it is a con man falling into the role and falling in love and doesn't want to be a con man anymore. It's a very simple story that we've seen a few times in films of that time frame. And really the movie is more about showcasing the choreography and the music than it is the actual story itself.
Well, when it comes to production design, that's what sets it apart from a Broadway musical. I mean, the fact that they build a whole city just for that movie alone. And the costumes, they really give you that sense of American nostalgia of that era.
But the thing with the costume design is, and the interesting point about the costume design is the lead actress, Miss Jones, was actually pregnant during the filming, so they actually had to change the costume design versus the Broadway film. But even the costume designers were brought in from Broadway. Everyone was brought in from the Broadway scene into the film.
Even the director itself.
Director and producer. You know, because the director also was the one that produced the film as well.
Yes.
Which was actually kind of rare for the time.
Yeah.
Actually. It's very rare that a musical crew comes in and does a movie basically from the ground up, as what they did.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the lead actor, Robert Preston. Now this is the role that he originated on Broadway, and it got him a lot of critical acclaim. And I gotta say, he knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, he was very, very good. It brings up an interesting question is, you know, because in the movie it's stated that, oh, he can't read a single note. Do you need to read notes to be musically inclined? Because he was fantastic when it comes to musical. Because even in his character, he was able to teach a barbershop quartet how to go. And, you know, that really speaks to his talent and ability of, oh, well, he's going to play this character that can't read a note, but can definitely play a note.
Yeah, and then there's Shirley Jones as the librarian, Marion. And I gotta say, I think she did a great job.
Very good job of playing the stuck-up, you know, stick in the mud role for the first half of the film.
And when it comes to the chemistry between those two, you can tell that they really start connecting.
They start connecting in the last third of the film, especially when her little brother, who, you know, would later go, you know, and the actor would later to go on and play in roles like Happy Days and stuff like that. Todd Howard.
Ron Howard.
Ron Howard, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the future Oscar winner Ron Howard actually ends up playing the little brother Winthrop. If any of you aren't familiar, he made some of the best films of the last couple of years. Cocoon, Apollo 13, Jim Carrey's The Grinch, very underrated in my book.
Apollo 13 is my favorite amongst that batch. But yeah, once the character Winthrop speaks more than a sentence, you know, that's when our main two protagonists really start to connect.
Yes. Now let's talk about like some of the side characters. Buddy Hackett as
Hackett.
his sidekick.
As that sidekick. You know, and of course, Buddy Hackett was one of the guys that did Shaboopy, one of the most classical musical numbers in all of film history.
Funny enough, that number alone was actually parodied in an episode of Family Guy.
It is, and I don't think it was just Family Guy either. I think other shows parodied it at some point too. But
yeah,
it is a classical musical. It is every definition of a classic as it can get for a musical.
Singing, dancing, elaborate costumes,
Elaborate choreography, very elaborate choreography.
courtesy of Ona White.
Yeah. You know, that's probably one of the best parts of the film was the choreography. Just how grand it is compared to anything else that would have been out at the time.
And the music, courtesy of the original Broadway composer Meredith Willson.
And you can't, don't forget to shut out the Buffalo Bills. You know,
Oh yes,
the Buffalo Bills.
The Barbershop Quartet. Those guys just nail it.
Yep.
I think that's got to be one of the best barbershop quartets I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, and they are. Well, again, they are one of the greats when it comes to the 1960s, and that was peak music. That was peak music in America. You know, you get the jazz movement just kind of fading out, and you get the rock and roll movement just fading in. So it's a very, very pivotal movement in America when it comes to music. Lots of different genres are both being invented and also faded out at the exact same time.
Yeah, and when it comes to musicals, this was like one of the really big ones before it started going downhill, because it was around the area when Hollywood was just starting to change how it films.
Yes, it's and again, very conservative film. You know, a lot of conservative ideas in the film were installed in that film.
With that said, let's talk about the production. I mean, the editing is really good.
I still don't know how they did a lot of the editing because, okay, with the editing of stereo sound, for example, stereo sound was very rare back then in the early 60s. You're talking some movie houses had it, but that's about it for when it comes to stereo. Because even music at the time, when you got a Schlack vinyl record, wasn't in stereo yet. That's how early stereo technology we're talking.
Yeah.
Stereo was only around for maybe 5 or 10 years, and who knows how long in movies. You know, and a lot of the stuff that was comped in for the movies, a lot of the sound effects, a lot of the anvil dropping, that had to have been a nightmare to comp in, because you can't really comp in or edit in much at the time. You're talking analog film strips they had to do this with.
But when they use it, it really helps add to the humor of that scene.
Yeah, a lot of humor. Lots of humor in the movie, actually, more than I was expecting.
Yeah, this is a musical comedy, and I gotta say, it definitely can get you a few good laughs.
Yes.
Especially if there's the mayor's wife who is so stuck up and snooty. But she's
definitely a character, especially when, she starts becoming the lead dancer of the, lead choreographer.
And next thing you know, they're making Grecian urns.
Yeah, it's a lot of very memorable characters in the movie that really, you would think wouldn't really work in a musical, but they made it work.
Yeah. There's one sequence in particular that I really thought was very cool. Right at the very beginning, what is considered like an early form of rap.
Yep, not to mention the stop motion animation at the very, very beginning, as an intro. That's probably my favorite part of the whole film is the stop motion animation along with the locomotive scene as they're going into River City.
Yes.
Based on a real place, by the way, River City.
Where?
Mason City, Iowa is what it's based on. I believe it's the director's hometown, if I'm not mistaken. And it was actually where the world premiere was for The Music Man, was in Mason City, Iowa, which that was the town it was based on, was Mason City. Yeah.
The film was a big success. It went on to receive 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture of 1962. It lost most of its award to the big film Lawrence of Arabia, but it did went on to win 1 Oscar for Best Score of a Musical Film. And I gotta say, the guy who adapted the score did a great job.
Fantastic job. It was basically a almost note-for-note replica of the musical, save for a few note changes and a few melody changes, simply so that it can translate to film a bit better. Because again, film in the 1960s, a little difficult to work with when it comes to music. There are actually some really, really low notes, really, really high notes that film physically couldn't pick up at the time. So they had to modify the music a little bit to make sure it would fit better on film.
But it worked.
It worked very well. They made it work.
In fact, this was so good, even the Hollywood Foreign Press gave it the Golden Globe Award for Best Musical Motion Picture.
Yeah, it's easy to see why, too, once you watch the movie. It's almost made me want to watch it like in an old school movie theater versus in front of my computer screen or on a TV. Because it is that kind of film where you gotta put everything aside. Don't think of it as watching a movie. You're more watching an experience, a show. And that's what it is. It's a show. Warner Brothers wanted to showcase the best of what they had to offer. Their best film, their best music, their best choreography, their best actors and actresses. And this lovely little showcase. And you can't really think of it as a movie in that sense. You gotta really think of it more of as a show as it was intended to in the musical Broadway scene. And just in a movie format instead of a musical.
Yeah, and I know that this isn't the only time it's been put on like a big screen.
No, it hasn't.
Back in like the early 2000s, The Wonderful World of Disney did a TV adaptation with Matthew Broderick and Kristen Chenoweth.
Yes, and I believe there was also another very, very recent adaptation on Broadway just last year.
With Hugh Jackman.
And people are saying that was one of Hugh Jackman's best roles besides Wolverine. People could not stop raving about Hugh Jackman's role, and the adaptation was lukewarm, but his part in it was quite good.
Well, it just shows that he's capable of so many roles.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Preston too. He was in so many movies during his time, not just musicals, but westerns, dramas.
Yeah, he's what you would call an old school Hollywood man. He's had his skin in the game for a very long time up this point.
Yeah. So all in all, we're going to be doing this rating from 0 to 5 stars. What would you give it?
I'm going to give it 3.5 stars, mainly because it's a little long, almost 2.5 hours, maybe even a little bit more. And you really can't think of it as a movie. You have to think of it as an experience. And it really has to be the perfect scenario for you to watch it.
Well,
that doesn't really come that often.
Well, I'm giving it 4 because this is, like I said, this is one of my favorite musicals ever. Heck, I was even in a kid's version of it, a kid's production of it when I was still in school. I was one of the barbershop quartet.
Yeah, I can see why. You have the voice for it. I'm not much of a musical guy. That's why I gave it a little bit of a lower rating. And again, it is a little bit lengthy, and you really can't come at it from a standpoint of, I'm going to watch a movie and throw it on the background. No, you can't do that. You have to actually sit yourself down, get some popcorn, and enjoy the show.
So if you're looking for a feel-good American film for the 4th of July to watch, The Music Man is definitely it. I would definitely recommend it, and I am so glad that we got to see it.
Yes, it was a good experience. It was a lot of fun watching it. Next time I throw it on, it's gonna go on my big screen TV with Dolby Atmos.
So that's it for our review of The Music Man. Up next, we're going 10 years ahead to 1972 with a film that takes place right at the start of America, 1776, based on the Tony Award-winning musical, directed by Peter L. Hunt and released by Columbia Pictures. During the Revolutionary War, the people of the Continental Congress are trying all they can to possibly declare independence from England. One guy in particular, John Adams, is trying to just persuade everyone he can, including founding fathers Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, to vote for independency.
Well, of course, at first it was all for nothing at first, because John Adams was not that likable of a character, very loud, very shrewd at times, and everybody else just wanted to get, kind of just end the war or bring everybody home, because they all see this as a lost cause. So John Adams needed to bring in another congressman altogether to actually put on the docket, no, we actually want to vote on the Declaration. We want to make sure we declare our independence. And actually bring in other people outside of Congress to do so.
I gotta say, first time I saw this, I did not expect it to be that good.
No, I didn't expect it either. Especially when you look at how long the movie is. It's knocking on 3 hours. It's 2 hours and 50 minutes.
Well, that's actually the director's cut. The original theatrical production was like 20 minutes shorter.
You can blame Nixon for that, but we'll get to that. We'll get there.
All in all, this was unlike any musical I've ever seen. In fact, there's only a few songs.
Yeah, not many.
Yeah. In fact, there's like a whole section of where there's not even any singing. It's like a whole half hour.
I think longer than that even. You know, you almost forget. There are points in the movie and the story progression where you forget that it's a musical until they start singing. And to be fair to the musical itself, I mean, yeah, it can kind of be classified as a musical, but I can almost think of ways that they can get away with it not being a musical, because the musical sequences themselves aren't that memorable, if we're being honest. You know, the choreography is not nearly as glamorous, and the singing it's pretty good. You know, like, it's shockingly good, actually, and you have a lot of distinct characters and voices to kind of boot with.
Speaking of characters, let's talk about the guy who plays John Adams.
Oh, yeah.
William Daniels. I thought he did a great job. If any of you don't know, William Daniels might have been popular on your TVs because he was the voice of Kid the Car in Knight Rider. He was Mr. Feeney, the teacher in Boy Meets World, and he did an Emmy Award-winning performance in the hospital drama of the 80s, St. Elsewhere.
Yeah, he plays the straight man, John Adams, and the whole thing. You know, the straight man that's stern and is like, no, we're gonna get the Declaration of Independence through, and I'm gonna fight like hell to do it.
And I gotta say, I did not expect his acting to be that good. I thought he did a great job.
He's a fantastic actor, good singing voice. He would, honestly, the kind of role he was playing makes you feel like he could be easily put in a Monty Python film. And I mean that in a good way. Because Monty Python, has a very similar, straight man mentality with a little bit of comedy and a little bit of singing, and he did a very good job taking that role on.
And there are a few good laughs in this movie too.
Yeah, lots of really good comedy,
especially with the guy who plays Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, let's talk about that for a minute.
I thought he did an awesome job.
I think it was, out of all the movies and TV shows I've seen with Benjamin Franklin, I think this one was the most historically accurate and true to form with Benjamin Franklin. Because if you watch the movie, you notice that he gets a little spicy, especially when Jefferson meets up with his wife Martha, midway through the movie. You could see that, Benjamin Franklin starts to get a little more hands-on and freaky than one would like to admit. But that was actually on brand for him at the time. I mean, if you want a good laugh, just read up on his escapades on what he was doing in France. Like, the man was a freak. Like an actual freak. He was not only eccentric and very intelligent, but he also did not want to, overstep himself a little bit and take on a big role in the Revolutionary War. Because, he's already up there. He doesn't really want to do that. He more wants to be behind-the-scenes man. But he also liked the party. Which was, and again, those intricate aspects of him as a person actually came true to life in the film, which is very, very rare.
Now let's talk about, speaking of Jefferson, let's talk about him.
Yes, also very true to form.
Yeah, I mean, it's not every day you see a good representation of the third president of the United States.
It is not, and there are some historical inaccuracies, particularly with Jefferson. There are two big ones with Jefferson in particular. And one's a bit harsher of a subject, so we'll avoid that one for a moment. We'll get to it, don't worry. But the other one is the fact that him and his wife Martha reunite shortly after they get married. That didn't happen. Martha and Jefferson did not get together during the time in late June, early July of 1776. They did not.
Yeah, this movie may look accurate, but it's not.
No, there are some key points that are extremely accurate, almost too good almost, and very real, but there are others that are just completely off the mark, and Jefferson's, well, I wouldn't say Jefferson's personality was on brand, but his interaction with his wife was not, and also his argument towards slavery wasn't either. Like, he was anti-slavery, but in the film he said he was going to give him up, but in real life he never did.
Yeah, that's the thing too. They do mention, when it came to the creation of the Declaration of Independence, the whole idea that all men are created equal, including the African Americans who were slaves.
Yes, and that was a very much a sort. And a lot of people say that's an inaccuracy. No, that's actually very accurate. That's, again, one of the most accurate things about the film is not only the butting heads about slavery, but also the disconnect between the Deep South and the North. That was real even in the 1770s.
They even did a whole song that deals with the whole triangular trade of the slaves and the
molasses, and also the what was the third one?
Cotton, I think.
Was it Cotton?
I don't remember. But other than that, I think it was very serious.
Yeah, it was a very serious thing, and even back then, that was actually very true to form. One thing I do think that they could have done a little bit more is the disconnect between North and South Carolina, because the two Carolinas actually hated each other back then. And in the movie, it was shown that they were like, oh, whatever. And North Carolina was like, oh, we'll do whatever South Carolina does. And it's like, no, that's not true. There's a reason they split in half.
Well, here's one thing that was true. The running gag with New York always abstaining from what they were voting on.
And they still do to this day. Well, actually, no, that's not true anymore. But, you know,
Let's not get political. Let's not get political.
This whole movie's about being political.
I mean, heck, there's a whole song that deals with the whole right wing.
Which is the most inaccurate part of the whole movie, because the idea of right and left wing didn't become a thing until the French Revolutionary War. Until the French.
Yeah, I mean, back during the 1770s, it was mainly the Federalists.
It was one party, the Federalists. And that was it. That you had the Federalists, and that was it.
Yes, well, other than that, I gotta say, when it came to, there was one song in particular that really got me. It was the one that Soldier was singing after he came in.
Yes, you know, and this is where it gets kind of serious here, so it really...
For any veteran out there, this is a song you can definitely relate to.
And we just want to say thank you for your service, honestly, because it is, honestly, it reminds you very, very, it's a very harsh reminder of how much really was sacrificed to make this country exist at all. This country was born out of sheer violence, for crying out loud.
Especially under the command of General George Washington.
Yes, and it was a very gloomy beginning, but we're still here. We're very proud of it, and we'll continue fighting for America's...
And here we are almost 250 years later.
Yes, and it's enough cannot be said about the men and women that have lost their lives to make this country, maintain this country being free.
And I mean, that song alone, it can really hit you right in the gut.
It can really, really hit you. You know, especially with the monologue leading up to it too, about oh yeah, there was fighting. I saw my best friend die, and it's like whoa, oh yeah, I guess and he couldn't have been more than 16 years old. You know, conscripts at the time were as young as 10. You know, drummer boys were as young as 10 years old.
Yeah. Other than that, there is one part of this movie that also helps make the success. You can definitely tell the chemistry between John Adams and his wife Abigail, even though they're never together.
No, I mean, you can and again, another pretty true-to-life form of it. You know, that's pretty true to life. They were always a really close pair. And I personally wasn't a huge fan of the musical sequences, but you could definitely tell that, you know, that was his ground zero. That was John Adams' ground zero to kind of go, okay, I need to give in a little. I need to get this done so that I can go back home.
Yeah, and the lady who played Abigail Adams, I thought she did a good job.
Yeah, very, very good job, even if it is only a handful of scenes, and she didn't really have that many speaking lines. Most of her role in the film is musically driven, but it is good.
Yeah. So all in all, let's talk about the production, because I think they did an awesome job. The sets, the costumes, they really bring that era back to life.
Yes, I think it's very good. Again, I think the production value could have been better because again, the musical sequences weren't as grandiose as the other musical we just talked about. You know, I think the most grandiose musical sequence there was when John Adams was actually off and away, and the Pennsylvania senator or congressman, what was his name? Dickinson. Was rallying, and that was like the most grandiose musical sequence was with the one featuring Dickinson.
Now,
and even that wasn't terribly that great.
Yeah. Here's the thing too. When it came out, the film even earned an Oscar nomination for its cinematography, and I gotta say, they did a really awesome job with those camera shots.
Yeah, they had fantastic camera shots. You know, and you also had, and it's easy to see why, because there was also a lot of distinct characters. It's hard to believe. A lot of these distinct characters that were featured in the House of Representatives were true to life. And it's kind of wacky to think about that, and that is the word I'd use, wacky, because all these characters are wacky in their own way. You have this stereotypical Scotsman that really brings a gun, like this actual, like, true giant rifle in. You have this rickety old man that's got cancer. You have the drunk that's representing Rhode Island.
You have the guy who's always abstaining for New York.
Yep, and then of course you have the Deep South, who are very, very gentlemanlike and very, talk very slowly and have that slight Southern twang. Not too heavy yet, but
yeah.
It all these wacky characters that are true to life and that are literally making a country. And it's like, how?
Yeah.
Sweet Jesus, how?
Like I said, this film was nominated for Best Cinematography, but it lost to another big musical film of that year, Cabaret.
Yeah, I've never seen Cabaret, but it's easy to understand why.
Yeah. All in all, what would you give this rating out of 0 to 5 stars?
I think I'm going to give it a little bit of a lower rating. I think it's going to be a solid 3.
I'll give it 3.5.
And a majority of that really comes down to the musical sequences are a little bit lackluster, but the story progression is very good. But it is a little long, nearly 3 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes for the director's cut, 20 minutes shorter. The reason it's 20 minutes shorter, fun fact, is because of the song about right wing and left wing.
Yeah.
Nixon didn't like that.
President Nixon.
President Nixon at the time did not like that, and of course this was amidst the Watergate scandal, and he was trying to have control over media at the time. So he asked if they could cut out that song in the movie, and they did, but then later left it in anyways for the director's cut.
No wonder he resigned.
That's not why he resigned. Let's not get political, but that's not why he resigned.
All in all, if you're looking for like a time capsule to watch like how America was born, 1776 is a good watch on the 4th of July if you're interested.
Very good. It's a very good, again, it gives you a real sense of what kind of men actually brought this country into existence, because a lot of the characters, again, are pretty true to life. More so than a lot of other media, even now. Because again, Ben Franklin's, they actually nailed Ben Franklin to a T, which was surprising.
Okay. So that was our take on 1776. Now we are going to what is considered the granddaddy of summer blockbusters. I am talking about the one and only Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg, released by Universal, and released in 1975. In a beach resort, there is this guy, police chief, who finds out that there's a killer shark out in the open, and it's up to him and a bunch of guys to try to take it out before any more tourists end up getting eaten. Mm-hmm. Now this is the film that put Steven Spielberg on the map.
Yes, it was also the end of an era, really, for creature features. It was the last great creature feature before any sort of things after that become more slasher and hokey horror films than a creature feature.
Now this film, if you haven't seen it, you've got to. Because this is
It's one of the greatest films of all time.
Like I said, this is basically the granddaddy of summer blockbusters. If it wasn't for this film, we wouldn't have had huge hits like Star Wars, Indiana Jones,
Back to the Future. We wouldn't have we wouldn't have Back to the Future. We wouldn't have Jurassic Park. We wouldn't have had Ready Player One. Basically, every single modern summer hit since, and even to this day, it can pay a tribute to Jaws in some way.
And Steven Spielberg, like I said, this was the film that put him on the map, and he just nailed it.
Yes, he wanted to make the ultimate shark flick. That was the goal of this. He had a goal of making the ultimate shark flick out of this story, out of the original book. And I think in every single way, he more than exceeded expectations.
Yeah, in case you didn't know, this movie was actually based on a book by the co-writer of the screenplay for the movie, Peter Benchley.
Yes.
And I gotta tell you, I actually found out that when it comes to like the characters in the book compared to the movie, they're actually not as likable as in the movie.
No, but of course, every movie has to have a character that's likable, right?
Yes.
That's relatable. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about Jaws, the original Jaws film, is how relatable and real it is. Like, take the summer scene, for example, with let's take the Bad Hat Harry scene, right? Shortly after the first shark attack scene where everybody's a little anxious. You see a really real depiction of summer in America on a beach. You really do,
Oh, yes.
Nothing glamorized about it. There is no glamour about it, You had these overbearing mothers putting way too much sun lotion on their kids. You had, You know, some people surfing and some people swimming, but not too many people. You know,
You have a guy just playing fetch with his dog.
yeah, and you know, and people were smoking cigars, and people were just relaxing, having a good time.
They were
It
even
was a
playing
very-
They were even playing video games
Well,
and arcade games.
well, arcade games, video games weren't really a thing yet, but Pong was definitely in the picture probably. That was the only video game at the time, though, and it was a very real and relatable scene. You know,
Yes.
Even the out of touch character who was wearing the black cap with the fin on it. You know, a very realistic scene and very.
Oh
true to
yes, the kid who did the prank.
life. No, I'm referring to that. I'm referring to Harry's hat.
Oh.
You know, that's one bad hat, Harry. You know.
Well, anyway, when it comes to that kid who did the prank,
Yeah, also very real life, very true to life.
I mean, think about how terrorized you would have been if you saw just a fake shark fin out in the water nowadays.
Yeah, and especially since literally a few weeks, like a couple days ago or weeks ago, there was an actual shark attack. So tensions were already pretty high with the locals as it is.
I mean, you could just see the sheer fear of those people.
And it's easy to understand why, because there was a lot of buildup. And that's the thing, there was a lot of buildup. That was one thing that Spielberg was a master at. You know, he really took the pages out of like the movies like The Birds from Hitchcock. You know, it had a Hitchcock-esque style buildup where you don't even see a shark for the first. Aside from the opening scene where the girl's skinny dipping and gets eaten,
That's considered one of the scariest moments in the history of cinema.
you don't see an actual shark for the first half hour of the film. That's a pretty significant chunk of time. You know.
Yeah, I mean, even when he's attacking on the 4th of July, you can barely see it.
Barely see it. It's the theater of the mind and the fear itself, the actual tension that makes it a horror movie, not the creature.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
There are the three main stars of the film,
Mhm.
and they each work off perfectly.
Yes.
There's Roy Schneider as the police chief,
Mhm.
Richard Dreyfuss as the marine biologist, and Robert Shaw as the down-to-earth fisherman who's stopping at nothing to find the shark.
You have the straight man who's the police chief, you have the nerd, and you have the grizzled adventurer who's seen some stuff.
Yes, I mean,
Three very interesting and dynamic characters that played off each other very, very well.
and the chemistry between the three of them, perfect.
Absolutely perfect. And that was the only three characters for like half the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the second half of the movie, it's just those three guys out on a boat in the middle of the ocean.
Trying to get the shark. And that's it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when it comes to the first half of the movie, though, there are some other interesting characters, too. I mean,
Mhm.
there's Lorraine Gray as the police chief's wife, who is
Yep.
very loyal, who wants to protect her kids from any dangers that are coming.
Very stereotypical family, you know, a nuclear family, one could even say, you know, where you have the wife, the husband, two kids.
And then you have Murray Hamilton as the mayor, who is just
Money.
so hateful.
Yeah, well,
He wants to do everything he can to keep the beaches open. He wants the business. He doesn't care if there's a shark.
but that's an understandable reason. Again, it's a very real reason. He doesn't want the summer economy to tank. You know, that is the town's bread and butter, is their summer beaches. And if they have to shut that down, then there's no economy. You know, so that's a very real approach to, okay, no, I actually do want to roll the dice a little bit, because if we don't, we lose, we don't have a way of life here.
I mean, there's a whole scene that lasts, it's an entire one-shot sequence that lasts like about 2 minutes. And you can just see the tension between the police chief, the marine biologist, and the mayor.
Yeah, and of course the mayor does eventually cave in and shut down the beaches, and it goes, okay, we'll pay $10,000 for you guys to go and kill the shark.
Now, when it comes to the shark itself, partially one of the reasons why you don't see it in the first half, well, you see, back then they used animatronics instead of CG,
Mhm.
and the shark wasn't working at all.
No, but it didn't need to. And again, that was Spielberg's specialty, was using stop motion animation, claymations, and animatronics. Those were his bread and butter. He didn't even want to use CGI for Jurassic Park. He wanted it to just be the same thing he did with Jaws and other films. Was, okay, I just want a really, really good animatronic, some really good claymations, that's it.
Yeah, well, when it comes to Jaws, I mean, even a scene, that scene with the pier with the roast. I mean, you see the pier actually turn around, and suddenly it's like, oh crap! It's on. It's after him. He got to get out of the water as soon as possible.
Yeah. And again, a lot of tension. Especially with the two notes.
Yes.
The two notes.
Courtesy of the legendary film composer John Williams. Now, this guy made two notes, and he made them two of the most iconic music notes in the history of film scores.
Yep. Not only that, he won several awards,
including an Oscar, a Grammy, a Golden Globe.
Two notes. It's literally the equivalent of, those stories where you sometimes hear in academia where, there's this one guy who wrote a thesis for his doctorate and it was only 1 page long or 1 paragraph long. That is the equivalent of that but cinema, and it actually happened. Imagine losing to that. Imagine being the guy who wrote this very complex piece for another film, and then you get outdone by two notes.
Yeah, I mean, this was the film that basically made John Williams the film composer that we know him as today.
Yes, reprising his role for Jaws 2, and also,
which we'll be talking about later.
Yep, and also doing many other films.
Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, almost every film Steven Spielberg has done.
Yeah, those two are an iconic pair. And enough can't be said about his long and also impressive career in the music industry when it comes to film.
If you're watching this, John Williams, I want to personally thank you. You have been a huge influence of so many people, especially us. I mean, the fact that you've been doing film scores for about 60 years, that is just incredible.
I have a challenge for you. Make a film score and win a nomination with one note now. You only get one note to work with. That's it.
not five like in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Not
two like Jaws.
You get one note. You do it too.
If you get a nomination, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
I would love to see you win at least one more Oscar before we lose you forever.
And it better be with one note. It has to be with one note.
Yes. All in all, also the production, they really bring that summer feeling to life.
They do. Very little life.
Courtesy of filming locations at Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and when it comes to production, they really didn't do anything that I would consider to be bleeding edge or groundbreaking. Because all they did was use very tried and true methods of film, and that's it. And they just did a very, very good job at that.
In fact, this film was so good, it received 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture of 1975.
Yeah, and they didn't do anything stellar. They didn't do animatronics. That's been a thing for about 5 or 10 years. Godzilla was doing that for a while. Underground water shots. They've been doing that since Creature of Black Lagoon, and even before that a little bit even. So waterproof cameras were always been a thing.
Yeah.
So a boat shots with a helicopter. Again, they've been doing that since Korea. So these are all methods that have been tried and tested for many years and sometimes even decades. And they just brought in people that knew their stuff. That was that.
In the end, this film earned 3 Oscars. Best Original Score for John Williams, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound.
Yeah, and again, they didn't use anything stellar or groundbreaking. They just used tried and true methods, and they just did it very well and were very meticulous about it.
I actually remember reading that Steven Spielberg was kind of ticked that he didn't get nominated for Best Director for the Oscars.
Later. He'll get one later. He'll get one later.
Well, it won't be until Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, that's true. But then, of course, he would have his biggest year in 92 or 93, which we better do an episode about that one.
Oh, yeah, 93 with Jurassic Park and Schindler's List.
I would love to do a 93 episode someday with those two movies.
All right, well, all in all, what would you give this?
4, easy 4, maybe even 4. Oh, no, 4.5. I'll give it a 4.5.
4.5 as well, because like I said, this is a must-watch.
It is.
The American Film Institute named it as the 2nd most thrilling film of all time, right behind Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
And I believe it's also one of the films that's listed in the 100 films that you must watch before you die.
Yes, and this was, and like I said, this has like one of the most iconic film scores of all time. It's one of the greatest films of all time. it's a must-watch.
Yeah, fantastic monologues, fantastic characters that are extremely memorable.
Oh yes, the one monologue alone with the USS Indianapolis, Robert Shaw knocked it out of the park.
Yes, and also his introduction to the his intro to the movie as well.
Yeah, with just a simple.
I got stuff under my nails. Anyways, I could not have done that.
Well, anyway, like I said, Jaws is a must-watch. If you're looking for a film to be on the edge of your seat for the 4th of July, this is it.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
So that was our review of Jaws. Now we're going 3 years ahead to 1978 with the sequel, Jaws 2, directed by Janik Schwartz and released by Universal. Just when people in Amity Island thought it was safe to go back in the water, another shark comes up. Now it's up to Chief Brody himself to take on the shark, and to make things even more complicated, his kids and a bunch of teenagers are in danger of being eaten by it.
Yeah, much higher stakes. And of course, it has to be for a sequel to be, you have to have more of everything.
Now, when it comes to sequels, this isn't bad. No. It could have been much worse. If you're wanting to watch the next 2 sequels,
don't bother.
Don't.
Nope, don't bother. I mean, I suppose you could get away with Jaws 3D if you want the hokey 3D stuff, but other than that, I wouldn't even bother with that even.
Both of them are piles of garbage in my book.
Yeah, I mean, Jaws 2 is... If Jaws is the last of a great... is one of the last great...
creature features.
If Jaws is the last great creature feature, then Jaws 2 is the first of its kind, too. It is a first of its kind slasher. It's the first slasher.
Yeah, I mean, it's the basic story. I mean, you got a bunch of teenagers, they're in a boat race, and you're like, who's gonna die?
Yep. Place your bets.
Yeah.
It really is. It's one of the first hokey teenage slasher films. It really is, unfortunately.
I mean, this was released the same year as Halloween, if I recall.
Yeah, and it's also still... And America is still kind of in that high of Star Wars and Smokey and the Bandit as well, so...
Yeah, and this was 1978. I mean, even though it may have not gotten the best reviews, it did... It was, for a brief time, the biggest sequel in cinema history.
Yeah. And of course, you may notice that the director, Spielberg, did not come back for this. He was offered the job to come back, but he felt that it was just going to be a cheap do-over, a cheap knockoff of the original Jaws film.
Yeah.
And he didn't really think it would be as big of a cinema hit as the original Jaws.
Yeah.
And he was content with making the ultimate shark movie.
But the thing is, when it comes to the director of this movie, Janik Schwartz, apparently he and Roy Schneider didn't get along.
No. So the chemistry of the film already is off to a bad start, and you also have this story of, oh, well, we're going to have a bunch of teenagers that are rebellious and fooling around, and it's like, okay.
Which one's going to die?
Which one's going to die? And not only that, we mentioned how that there's a lot of build-up with Jaws, with the original Jaws. That you don't get that in Jaws 2. No, within the first 10 minutes, sharks start appearing.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, no build-up.
And compared to the original, they have a full-functioning animatronic shark that works very well in my book.
Yeah, it could even be the same rendition of the original ones, just with
upgraded
with mechanical improvements.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what made it... I mean, sure, it would have been good if we didn't see the shark, but I understand that now that they had, like, the actual working parts, they could actually show it more.
Yeah, and they really did. But I think that almost hurts the movie.
Exactly.
It hurts the movie that the shark shows up earlier and more frequently. Because you don't get that tension or build-up at all. All you get is, oh dear, which one is he going to eat?
Yeah, I mean, there's this scene alone where it's chasing a water skier, and you're like, okay, she's done.
Yeah, and there's no build-up. None at all. And it's kind of disappointing. Now, the one thing I did like about the movie, though, there are some redeeming qualities. The first one is, of course, the family dynamic.
Oh, yes. Roy Schneider and Lorraine Gray return as the Brodies. Their boys are played by a different group of actors, but, they're older,
Yeah, they're older, and there definitely is a bit more dynamic to it, to the family as a whole. You could definitely see that, Chief Brody is a little bit more on edge about sharks. He may even have some trauma and PTSD from the previous film.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, he has to take on a full-size great white shark again.
Well, not necessarily, because at first that they aren't even sure. They even bring in a new shark expert and they're like, we don't know if it is or not. And Brody kind of gets a little paranoid and even loses his job.
Yeah, and Murray Hamilton also returns as the mayor, and he's not as likable.
No, somehow he's worse. Somehow, well, again, it's relatable to why. Again, you have this new resort that just opened up, so it could ruin the economy. And there is even less evidence of a shark than there was in the first film. At least in the first film, a shark actually showed up, and the mayor acknowledged that. This time around, there's next to no evidence aside. Well, there's evidence, and we as the viewers of the movie know that there's a shark. But from the perspective of the mayor and the city council and literally almost everybody, including Brody's own family, there ain't no shark. There isn't enough conclusive evidence to determine that.
It's not until it starts attacking teenagers when they know that there's a shark.
Yeah, and that's not until almost halfway through the film.
Yeah, and next thing you know, there's this one girl that's just so screechy and all that stuff.
Yeah, and again, very much, the last half of the film is very much, it's every single slasher movie, horror B movie. It literally is, unfortunately. And
yeah.
It hurts it. It really does. Because they try to put a lot more on the line, putting Brody's kids in stake. Like, oh gosh, I need to rescue my kids. And it's, there's a lot more on the line. But the buildup isn't there. Once again, there isn't as much urgency.
Yes. There is another quality in this movie that does help it a bit. John Williams comes back for the film score.
Yeah, yes he does. And again, it's a pretty good film score. And one interesting thing I liked about it was there actually was one attack of the shark, that didn't have the two notes. So it literally came out of left field. That one got me. There was one attack where the two notes didn't precede it, and the two notes didn't precede it, and that one got me. That one got me to jump a little.
Yeah, this was one of, when it comes to sequels, like I said, this isn't the worst. It could have been much worse. If you're looking for the other two, like I said, I wouldn't recommend them one bit.
No, there are some aspects where they're really good. Like, I think my favorite part of the film was the fight scene, where Brody uses his knowledge of the shark I'm going to focus on noise and electrocutes the shark. That's also a really good part of it. That's a worthy climax to the original. It's a very worthy climax. However, it does kind of leave a plot hole of how does everybody get back home, because Brody's radio is conked out and the boat's conked out. How does everybody get back home? That is a minor plot hole that I feel is kind of lacking.
Yeah, and like I said, when it first came out, it was at one time the most successful sequel of all time. Until, if I recall, Rocky 2 took its place.
Rocky 2 and then Back to the Future Part 2.
Yeah.
Both are...
don't forget The Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back. All those come out quite a bit later, sometime in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah,
Jaws 2 is probably the first sequel. Direct sequel to a film. There are other movies that had sequels, but not nearly to this caliber.
Yeah. It was one of the highest grossing films in 1978.
Yeah.
The biggest film of that year was Superman.
Yep. And it's easy to see why. Again, Superman, we can talk about that at a later time, but Superman is deserving of that.
Yeah. So, this might have been brief, but when it comes to Jaws 2, personally, like I said, it could have been much worse. I'm giving this a grade of 3 out of 5 stars.
I was going to give it 2.5. Because, again, it's not much climax, and it's just a hokey horror film. And again, it's the first of its kind. So if you're into those kind of films where you like, slasher films,
plus its tagline,
movies.
Plus its tagline is one of the most famous in cinema history. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water.
Yeah, and that tagline's been rehashed over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And again, it really set a precedent for bad shark movies. It really did. Because then you get Shark 3D. You get Jaws 3D, and then you get Sharknado. So Jaws 2.
Well, when it comes to Sharknado, I've heard that they're actually considered so bad they're good.
Yeah, but Jaws 2 is kind of the point where it's okay, we're still taking shark movies seriously, and then it's just downhill.
Yeah.
And and even to this day, I think they are still doing new Jaws films, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, not Jaws in general, but just shark films.
Yeah, because I think the most recent Jaws film wasn't that long ago.
I mean, it's not like we're gonna have like a Jaws 19 like in Back to the Future Part 2.
I'm not taking chances. There's been so many rehashes of so many movies, I wouldn't put it past them.
Well, we're already past the year that movie Back to the Future Part 2 takes place in.
Yes, but they were off about a few things. They were also off about the world, about the Cubs winning the World Series by 1 year. But they got the Nike shoes correct.
Yeah, well, anyway, that was our review. If you're looking for an okay movie to watch after Jaws, if you're looking for just a double feature for the 4th of July.
Yeah, it's a good double feature option. Also, if your local drive-in movie theater, if that still exists, I know there's 2 by me. If they ever do a Jaws night where they do Jaws 1 and 2, oh yeah, go for it. 100%.
Yeah. So that was our take. Well, anyway, as you can see, we're going to be getting ready for the 4th of July pretty soon. I hope you have a great holiday.
Yeah, my bratwursts are burning.
Yeah. Our next episode, we're going back to the 1930s, almost about 90 years ago, and we'll be looking at 4 films featuring dance sequences from one of the most influential choreographers in the history of cinema, Busby Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
Till then, I'm Chris Wired, and this is Jacob, and
Hello.
Thank you for watching Chris's Classic Cinema.